As I was preparing for today, there was a question that I just kept coming back to. A question that I couldn't get away from. It's not a question that I haven't asked before. It's just that, well, I found my previous answers unsatisfactory. And so I just kept coming back to it. The question is this: why didn't they believe him? Jesus, over and over again, says, here's the deal. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to die, and then I'm going to come back to life. And I understand why the crowds didn't believe him. But when it comes to those who were closest to him, when it comes to the 12 who had been with him for 3 years, who had seen him do incredible, miraculous things, why didn't they believe him? He told them over and over again. Listen, Mark chapter 8. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't in a parable. He's very straightforward. Okay, guys, here's the deal. This is the plan. I'm going to be killed, and then 3 days later, I'm going to come back. He talked about it so much that his enemies knew he was saying he was going to do this. Listen to what it says in Matthew 27. The next day, after Jesus is put on that cross, the next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I will rise again. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't something he was just sharing with the 12. He was very clear. Even his enemies knew. He had said, no, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to come back. So here's my question. Why didn't they believe him? And you might say, well, it's miraculous. No one's going to expect the miraculous. And it's true. Inside of Scripture, they don't expect the miraculous. They're always surprised by the miraculous. But here's the thing, and this is where, and I've given that answer in the past, but this is where it's a little bit unsatisfactory for me. You realize they had seen Jesus raise 3 people from the dead. It wasn't like he was predicting something that they hadn't already seen. They had seen Jesus bring 3 people back from the dead. One of them had just died, so you could be like, I'm not sure they were really dead. But one of the other ones was in a funeral procession, been dead for a bit. Lazarus had been dead so long that his sister is worried he's going to stink. Listen to what it says. Take away the stone. This is Jesus speaking. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor. It's kind of like that mouse that died in your wall a couple weeks ago. By this time there's a bad odor, for he has been dead there 4 days. That's a long time to be dead. 4 days. And they see him bring him back to life. 3 times. 3's a lot. I'm betting you haven't seen it once. 3 times. So, why don't they believe him? And it's not just that. It's not just that they don't believe him. When Jesus goes to that cross, these individuals who before this were all in. As a matter of fact, there's one point where Jesus is teaching and he says some things that are hard to understand. The crowd begins to leave. Jesus turns to his disciples and says, hey, are you going to leave too? And they're like, where do we go? We're all in with you. We got nowhere else to go. If you're not the one, we got nothing. They are all in. And then Jesus goes to the cross. And don't miss this. It's not just that they don't believe him. Jesus goes to that cross, and their faith disappears. It crumbles. It shatters. They immediately lose faith. They didn't even wait 3 days to lose faith. I would understand if maybe it's the fourth day and he didn't do what he said he was going to do, but they immediately lose faith. Why? As I wrestled through this, I began to think through other situations where I've seen individuals who had great faith, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And I've been able to have conversations with several people where that's been their story. And as a pastor for 23 years, I've been able to sit down, and I know some of you are thinking, wow, you look really young to be a pastor for 23 years. Yeah, it takes work, but I've had a lot of those conversations, and it's interesting because there's a theme in them. Almost every time it starts with something theoretical. It starts with an idea. But then if you sit in the conversation long enough, it moves from being intellectual to being relational. And the thing that I've experienced in those conversations time after time after time is this. They believe that somewhere along the line, God had been unfaithful. They don't say it that way. But somewhere along the line, something happened that they felt was out of line with who God said that he is, or what God said he was going to do. And when God was unfaithful, their faith ended, which makes sense. Because you understand that's what faith is, right? Faith is believing that someone will be faithful. Faith is us believing that God is faithful with what he has said he's done, with who he is and what he says he's going to do. That's what faith is. We trust that God is faithful. That's why the biggest question in all of Scripture is God faithful? And I've experienced this theme that somewhere along the line, something happens and they believe God was unfaithful. And so their faith ends. It doesn't take time for that to happen. Only a fool has faith in someone who's unfaithful. It doesn't take time. It just ends. And as I thought back through those conversations, it changed the way that I looked at this moment for the disciples. Because I don't think it was just about Jesus dying. I think it was about whether God was faithful. Whether or not you could trust God. And when they saw Jesus go to that cross, they said, we can't trust him anymore. Because, listen, the disciples had believed a promise. God had made a promise. God had made a promise that there was going to be a Messiah. And the disciples believed the promise, but from the beginning of the story, you see that they don't really understand the promise. As a matter of fact, you see they believe in, they actually believe in the wrong promise because they believed that God had promised that there would be a Messiah, and that Messiah was going to come, and he was not only going to overthrow Rome, he was going to conquer the world, and Israel was no longer going to be oppressed, they were going to be the rulers. That's what they believed the promise was. They believed Jesus was there to fulfill that promise. That he was going to be the one who actually did this, that actually accomplished this. They believed that promise. But here's the thing. A cross could not fit in that promise. This is why, as Jesus is telling them, here's the plan, guys. I'm going to die, and then I'm going to come back to life. I'm going to die, and I'm going to come. This is why they keep correcting him. I don't know if you saw it in that passage earlier, but as he's speaking plainly to them about the fact that he's going to die and come back, listen to what it says. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Peter loves to correct Jesus. As you read through the story, it's one of his favorite things. Loves to correct Jesus. Sometimes I feel like he gets a little bit of a bad rap for that. I'll hear people talk about it. I can't believe you would correct Jesus. Really? Really? You never been in a situation where God's like, hey, we're going to do this. And you're like, no, we're going to do this. You never correct Jesus? Maybe he's more relatable than we thought. But in this moment, Jesus says, this is the plan. Peter's like, no, Jesus. You have great intentions. You just have the wrong plan. Jesus, you got great power. You just have the wrong plan. Let me share with you the plan. Let me share with you the promise. This is how this is going to work out. They believed in a promise, but they believed the wrong promise. And a cross didn't fit in that promise. It was incompatible. So when they come to the cross, they believed God had been unfaithful. And their faith ended. Easter screams into our life. Listen, Easter screams into our life. Pay attention to what you believe God has promised. Pay attention to what you believe God has promised. They believed the wrong promise. God never said that. It was not a promise. They believed. Pay attention to what you believe God has promised. And God has made some incredible promises. Because of the cross and because of Easter, he's made some incredible promises to you. Unbelievable promises. Some of you are here today for the first time. You're checking this thing out. And this is going to be the first time that you've ever heard this. It's unbelievable what the cross and Easter have made possible. Let me just walk you through a few of them. John chapter 1, yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. He says, if you'll place your faith in me, if you'll trust me that I went to that cross for you, if you trust me that I'm faithful with who I say that I am and what I've done, you can not just be part of my kingdom, you can be adopted as my child. You can be adopted as my child. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. I promise you that if you trust me, that I'm faithful, you'll be with me forever. Romans 3, but now a righteousness from God, apart from the law, has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. He says, not only that, but you can be made right. You can be made pure. This righteousness comes from God through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Ephesians 1, in him we have redemption through his blood. In other words, we've been bought back to forgiveness of sins. He promises, if you'll trust me that I'm faithful, if you'll trust me that I gave my life for you on that cross, you can be completely forgiven. There's nothing that stands between you and your Father. Hebrews 13, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. He promises that he will always be with you. He promises that you're loved. He promises that you're valued. God has made some unbelievable promises to you. And because Jesus went to that cross and took all of our sin and paid that penalty, you can experience and know those promises. Doesn't matter who you are. This is why we say all the time here at Hoboken Grace. Doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, or what you've done. This is available to you. You don't earn it. You're not good enough for it. It's not for a few. It's available to you. And God's not saying this might happen. He says, no, this is a promise. But, listen to me, listen. There is another promise. And that is this. God also promises that there will be Fridays. A couple days ago, we celebrated Good Friday. And God doesn't just say that this is going to be part of Jesus' experience. He says, no, I want you to understand something on this journey. I've made some incredible promises to you, but I want you to understand as you're on this journey that there will be Fridays. This conversation in Matthew chapter 16 must have been very interesting for the disciples. Because Jesus is talking to them about what it means to be a disciple, and he says this, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Now, here's the interesting thing about this passage. Jesus hasn't gone to the cross yet. So if you're a disciple, you're like, where'd the cross thing come from? Why are we talking about crosses? Who brought up crosses? I don't feel like we should be talking about crosses. Peter, can you talk to him about this? And he says, I want you to understand. There are going to be Fridays. And as long as God is patiently pursuing those who are lost, there are going to be Fridays. As long as God is continuing to seek those who have not yet experienced him, those who've walked away from him, there will be Fridays. Because listen to me, when God rescues us, he doesn't take us out of the brokenness, he sends us into it. He doesn't just rescue you to be rescued, he rescues you to be part of the rescue mission. He sends us into it, and he says, on this mission, there's going to be some Fridays. Don't let it surprise you. It shouldn't have surprised them. You realize that Jesus wasn't the introduction of the fact that the Messiah would have to die. You understand that, right? You go back to the Jewish scriptures, it's everywhere. Isaiah writes about it over and over again. Not just that. One of the most amazing passages, as it pertains to this, is actually found in Psalm 22. Psalm 22 is a prophetic psalm about the Messiah. Listen to what it says. It says, dogs have surrounded me. A band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and feet. It's talking about what? It's talking about the crucifixion. Now, here's the amazing thing about this. Not only is this written 1,000 years before Jesus comes on the scene, but this is what blew my mind when I researched this. Did you know that it took 300 more years before you have the first recorded crucifixion? Rome doesn't start using crucifixion for 600 years after this psalm is written. And what is he describing? They pierced my hands and feet. They shouldn't have missed it. And as we come together today and we celebrate Easter, I want to make sure that you don't miss this. God has made some incredible promises, but he has also promised that there will be Fridays. And if you don't understand that, listen to me. If you don't understand that, Friday's going to show up and it's going to take you out. Just like it did with them. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because that's your story. And your friend invited you and you said yes because they wouldn't shut up about this. And so you finally agreed to come. Or maybe you came today because it's nostalgic and it's Easter. But the reality is that your faith died a long time ago. Because Friday showed up. And what you believed about God's promise was incompatible with that. And so your faith died. Listen to me. It's not just that God says they might. God says, no. As I'm sending you into this broken world, I want you to know there will be Fridays. But, and I love this about Easter. Listen. Easter is not just the fulfillment of God's previous promise. And make no mistake, it was the fulfillment of God's previous promise. Easter is not just the establishment of God's future promise. All those things that we talked about, they're only possible because of Easter. All those promises are established, built on Easter. But Easter is not just the fulfillment of God's promise. Easter is not just the establishment of God's future promises. Listen to me very carefully. Easter is a promise. Easter is a promise. I love how Jesus, as he's talking to his disciples, he talks about both promises. He says, I promise, guys, there's going to be a Friday. I'm going to have to die, but I also promise there's going to be a Sunday. And he's talking about these two promises. Listen to me, don't miss this. God has made the same promise in your life. There will be Fridays, but you listen very carefully. There will be a Sunday. There will always be a Sunday. I love how Joseph captured this long before Jesus. He captured this about God. And he said this as he's talking to his brothers. He said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Joseph realized, there's a lot of different reasons why things come into my life, but I know what my God does with those things. I know how he brings beauty out of brokenness. I know how he brings life out of death. I know how he brings good out of evil. I know how he does that. Romans 8 talks about this, how he uses everything in our life for our good. Doesn't matter what Friday you encounter. He says, no, there's going to be a Sunday. I love how James talks about this. James is crazy. James chapter 1 says this, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials. He says, James steps into real life and says, hey, when you encounter the Friday, get excited. He doesn't just say there's going to be Fridays, not just that there's going to be trials. He says, when you encounter Friday, here's what I want you to do. Get excited. He's like, James, what are you talking about? You want me to get excited when I encounter Friday? Who gets excited when you encounter Friday? Let me tell you who gets excited when you encounter Friday. Somebody who watched his brother die on a cross and then come back to life. Somebody who watched the early church get persecuted like you couldn't imagine, and God used it to rescue hundreds of thousands of people. James had seen not just one Easter, he'd seen a bunch of Easters. And he'd seen the reality that God was not just the God of one Easter, God is the God of Easters. And so he says, yeah, there's going to be Fridays. When you get there, get excited. Because you know what's coming. Because you know what's coming. But here's the thing. For some of you, you're here, and you encountered that Friday, and it took you out. And because of that, you missed the Easter. The disciples encounter that Friday, and it takes them out, and they missed Easter. One of the most heartbreaking things for me is the fact that Jesus walks out of that tomb and none of them are there. He's alone. They missed Easter. You understand that about Easter, right? There was no celebration on Easter. We celebrate Easter. There was no celebration on Easter. Peter wasn't having an Easter egg hunt. They missed it. And some of you, a Friday took you out and you've missed your Easter. But I want you to know something. It's waiting for you. But you got to come home. It's time to come home. You got to realize he didn't promise that there wouldn't be Fridays. But he did promise there would be an Easter. There will always be an Easter. Turn to your neighbor, say, there will always be an Easter. Oh my. Wow, there was some conviction there. Like, I'll tell you what, I mean, that was some serious conviction. Do we need to start over? Turn to your neighbor and say, there will always be an Easter. Excellent. But you've got to come home. You've got to come home. You've got to decide to trust him again. And sometimes that can be really hard. I remember the Friday that almost took me out. When my son was born with Down syndrome, I was like, God, that's not a Friday I want. I'm good with a lot of other Fridays, but not that one. How about we do the lose your job Friday? Let's go with that one. I can do that one. I can handle that one. This one, it took me a long time to trust God with that Friday. Last month, my son turned 15. Let me tell you, we've experienced a lot of Easter. A lot of Easter. He's not just the God of one Easter. He is the God of Easters. And there will always be a Sunday. Will you bow your head with me? Some of you are here right now, and you are in the midst of a Friday. I want to invite you to have a conversation with God today, to go to him, to be honest about it. You don't have to lie about it. Jesus was honest about it. You don't have to pretend. Go to him and say, this hurts. This hurts. But I trust you that there will be a Sunday. I trust you that there will be an Easter. For others of you, maybe you're here and a Friday took you out. I want to invite you to go to him and say, I'm coming home. I'm coming home. I don't want to miss Easter. I'm coming home. For others of you, maybe you've been on this journey and you've begun to believe the wrong promise. Maybe you've begun to believe if you're faithful enough or if you're good enough, there won't be Fridays. I invite you to go to him and say, I trust you. I trust you even with the Fridays. That there will be a Sunday. And then some of you are here today, and this is the first time you heard any of these promises. I want to invite you receive the promises of Easter today. For the first time, to be adopted into his family. We're going to put a prayer up here on the screen. It's just an example of what that conversation looks like. And I want to invite you right where you are, just between you and him, to pray something like this. Father, I want to come home. I trust that Jesus gave his life for me, and in faith, I accept your promises. I realize my sin and my brokenness and my need for forgiveness. I ask you to make me yours, and I trust your promise and Jesus' gift of salvation, not my effort. Thank you. If you've never had that conversation, if you've never accepted the promises that Easter made possible, I invite you to have that conversation today. To step into a relationship with the God of Easters. Jesus, we are so grateful. So grateful for what you accomplished that Easter morning. So grateful, Father, that you are not just the God of one Easter, but that you have shown yourself to be faithful over and over and over and over again, for there to always be a Sunday. In Jesus' name.